Are you prepared for sleepless nights if you're looking for a tranquil evening stay clear of these bone chewing hospital horror tales that will haunt your dreams and banish any hope of peace or slumber? As a nurse, I'd worked in various hospitals and facilities. Before landing at my current workplace, among them was a geriatric hospital near my home. Where I had experience with elderly patients, it was business as usual until that fateful shift on my second to last shift, when I discovered the terrifying reality of the graveyard shift assigned to the Alzheimer's ward. I was well received by the residents, being a young presence. I offered them a connection to the present, a breath of fresh air without someone to anchor them. Their thoughts could wander elsewhere, but with me around, they were tethered to the moment. Among the patients, there was one who stood out. Margaret. It was my first encounter with her, and from the moment I entered her room, she would talk vividly about the voices she heard in the dark figure lurking in the corner. The other lady in the room asked me to keep the curtain closed, hoping to avoid Margaret's unsettling presence. Although Margaret smiled when I was near, she remained mostly silent and forgetful as the night progressed. Most patients were sound asleep, but Margaret stayed awake, played by the alleged voices and the man in black. I must admit it sent shivers down my spine, while I understood that her perceptions were a product of her own mind. I couldn't help but sympathize with the sheer terror she experienced. He had added my best to soothe her and coax her into sleep, refraining from turning on the television out of consideration for the other patient holding Margaret. Trembling hands, I reassured her that she was not alone. I urged her to breathe and relax, promising that I was only a call away. Gradually, she calmed down, and when I returned to her room, later she'd finally fallen asleep. Once the patients dozed off, the night seemed to crawl by it, and agonizing, this slow paced time fell as if it was moving in reverse. Then, an hour or two later, as I stoked supplies in the linen room, an eerie sound echoed through the room. Startled, I turned around, but there was nothing there. I returned to my task only to feel an unmistakable hand on my shoulder. I spun round screaming in horror, but the shoulder that bore the weight was empty. No one else was in the room, and the silence in the corridor was deafening. After a brief moment to gather myself, I continued with my duties as I filter. Carter turned to face the door and froze in sheer terror, a man dressed in blacks, and outside, peering through the glass. Grinning at me, my screams pierced to stillness, awakening the entire ward. But when my fellow nurse rushed in to assist me, the man had vanished. Without a trace, she saw nothing confused and terrified her. Rushed to Margaret's room, now wide awake, she recounted the voices she'd heard, and when I inquired about the man in black, her face transformed in a gaze intensified with a trembling voice. She asked how I knew, causing my heart to skip a beat. Suddenly, she erupted into screams, pleading to be taken away and warning that he was coming. The other nurses harrowed to calm her down, and I was probably reassigned to a different ward that night, overwhelmed. I left early and contacted the head nurse the next day to inform them that my upcoming shift would be my last. I explained how the experience had traumatized me, expressing my reluctance to set foot in that building again. The head nurse responded kindly, understanding the gravity of the situation. I'd never been diagnosed with a condition or experienced hallucinations, and while sleep deprivation can have its effects, this was something entirely different. Perhaps Margaret's words had unknowingly played tricks on my mind. But the sensation of the hand on my shoulder had the image of the smiling man behind the glass matched the descriptions she'd given me. It wasn't an inexplicable supernatural encounter, a once in a lifetime event. Well, so I hope. 4 and 3 years ago, I was struck by a terrifying ordeal, bacterial meningitis, living in South Florida. There was no outbreak to blame, leaving me puzzled its origin as the symptoms intensified. Excruciating headaches, confusion, fatigue, nausea, and a loss of appetite consumed me. But it was the arrival of hallucinations that pushed me to the edge. Bedridden while my husband tiled away at work, I heard a child's voice echo, "Mom," from downstairs, baffled. I dragged myself out of bed and peering down the stairway and calling my husband's name. Unsurprisingly, silence greeted me. He was miles away, occupied by his job. The throbbing in my head overwhelmed me. forcing me back to bed. Yeah, again, a voice came from downstairs. It whispered a chilling, "Hello, anxious." I dialed my husband, frantically recounting the spine tingling child's voice haunting our home. Harry, my distress. He left work to rush me to hospital while are waiting for his return. I changed out of my pajamas, however. As I did so, I found myself sprinting to the bathroom, overcome by waves of nausea mid vomit. In every voice penetrated the air outside the bathroom. Its words startled me, and I couldn't discern if the voice matched the previous one. I felt my sanity was on edge. It wasn't until I was in the hospital that I received a diagnosis, and the severity of the situation dawned on me. Left untreated, my condition could prove fatal. The doctor, acknowledging the rarity of hallucinations, assured me it wasn't unheard of antibiotics course in my veins, their life-saving antibodies gradually taking effect. The doctor emphasized my swift hospitalization as a stroke of good fortune, as delaying would have dire consequences. My husband remained by my side for hours, until eventually he had to return home, leaving me under the nurse's watch. Despite feeling like death, sleeping as quickly overcame me. That's when the nightmare has begun in my dream. My ex-husband loomed over me, spewing horrible words about my current spouse. He caressed my forehead and expressing relief at my well-being. I'm boasting about rushing to my side, and then a stream of hatred for my husband poured forth, even veering into killing threats. Then he exited the room, leaving me shaken, awakening in a groggy hazer scan. The room, a chair faced by hospital bed, but no one occupied it. The chair hadn't been there when my husband departed, assured myself. It was the middle of the night. I succumbed to sleep once more. The following morning, I discovered the nurse present in my room, sharing my vivid dream. She responded with an unsettling revelation. My supposed cousin had paid me a visit the previous night. Bewildered, I protested. Satan had no cousins residing in the state. Her demeanor grew weary as she confirmed, "Well, someone claiming to be our cousin came, David." The name struck fear into my heart. David was my ex-husband's name. With urgency, I recounted the situation to the nurse, who quickly summoned a doctor. They attributed delirium to the antibiotics and impairing my ability to distinguish between dreams and reality. Seeking answers, I texted David, demanding an explanation for his hospital visit and how he knew about my condition. My messages were delivered, but he remained silent, frustrated. I confronted him about his threats towards my husband, vowing to involve the police. Minutes later, a Chilean reply arrived. "I never threatened your husband. I was only there to ensure your well-being. You must have misconstrued things in your sleep, feeling threatened. I want him to stay out of my life or face legal consequences." Silence followed, and I chose not to disclose the threats to my husband, uncertain about their validity. With the combined effects of antibiotics and my pre-existing auditory hallucinations, I questioned the veracity of what I'd heard. Depart in the hospital a week later, I've carried the lingering doubts with me as we embark on the captivating tale of Story 3. Make sure to join our channel's journey by subscribing, granting yourself access to an abundance of thrilling content similar to the one you're enjoying at this very moment. I had a chilling encounter with a girl named Sarah on Tinder. She had an edgy style with tattoos and red highlights in her hair, and her profile mentioned that she loved exploring. Sarah suggested we go on a unique first date to an abandoned hospital on the outskirts of town. Intrigued, I agreed. We drove to the hospital, using the time to get to know each other. When we arrived, Sarah directed me to park in a hidden spot, and we made our way inside. Navigating the dark hospital, we relied on our phone flashlight. Sarah seemed familiar with every nook and cranny. As we reached the first floor, a noise startled us. We switched off our lights, tense with anticipation. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed nearby, fumbling through the darkness. We sprinted back to the staircase, our house pounding. We reached a higher level and resumed talking, believing the noise came from fellow explorers. However, our relief was short-lived. Sounds emerged from the exit staircase we just left. Panicking, I followed Sarah. She led us through the maze-like building. The feeling of being pursued consumed me, leaving me uncertain whether I preferred encountering the police or somebody else entirely. Finally, Sarah brought us to a lower rooftop, and we caught our breath. The sense of being followed dampened our spirits, and even Sarah seemed troubled. After a while, we entered the ceiling of our large room through a broken window. I hesitantly followed Sarah across some narrow wooden planks, fearing a fall from this height. We reached a pillar where we sat, our legs dangling over the edge. The darkness below created an eerie atmosphere. Suddenly, we heard footsteps from beneath those. We quickly illuminated the area with our flashlights, revealing a middle aged man dressed in black. He smiled and beckoned us to come down with a bold and chilling voice, uneasy. I asked if he was a police officer, but he ignored my question, repeating his unsettling invitation. Fearful, Sarah and I stood up and hurried back across the narrow planks. The threat of falling was even more terrifying now. Midway, the man hastily exited the room below us. Headed towards us, we had to move quickly. Reaching safety, we raced down the opposite stairs and hearing his footsteps closing in on us. Desperate to escape, we sprinted through the hospital back to the basement and climbed through the broken window. The process felt haunting, like a lurking presence. We ran across the parking lot to find my car, finally feeling a moment of relief. We locked the doors, trying to catch our breath, realizing the nightmare we just endured, and yet oddly surviving the ordeal together formed an instant bond between us. We quickly drove away, stopping at a Taco Bell to gather our thoughts. We spent an hour in the car sharing our experiences. Eventually, I dropped Sarah off, and though we briefly dated, we've remained close friends. Neither of us are dead to return to that hospital again, preserving the memories of our terrifying escapade. Beware, dear viewers, for within the realm of these chilling tales, like something far more bone-chilling, can you fathom the darkness that would engulf your existence if you dare turn away, forsaking the feast of our captivating videos. Brace yourselves, for the terror of a life devoid of our captivating tales awaits those of you who lack the courage to plunge deeper into our captivating abyss.